Okay, so in this video, we are going to go over creating adjustments and adding adjustments to our photos so we get the result that we want. Now, when we cut with a laser cutter, or when we do the engraving aspect of it, it's going to go around like a printer, top to bottom, left to right, and it's going to, as it moves over the surface, burn anything that's black and not burn anything that's white. So the laser knows two things: on, off, burn, don't burn. Because of something called dither, it also allows you the option of creating something in grayscale. So we can get these mid-tone grays by doing something similar to how, and you might see it a little this if we zoom in like this, something similar to how newspapers work. It can dot, burn quickly, an area that's gray. The closer the dots are together, the darker the color. The further they are apart, the lighter the color will be. So it's the same way newspapers are printed. The laser engraver can do an entire grayscale by burning in this manner. It's called dithering. And there's a setting for turning that on when we begin setting up the laser cutter, and you'll see that when we film that part of the videos. But because of that, we need to make sure that our image is black and white. Now, I've already got a black and white image, but if you have a color image, it's real easy to go to your image adjustments up here, which is where you're going to find a ton of your adjustments. You can also go to adjustments here in your panel. Now, there's a huge difference between adjustments here and adjustments here. Any adjustments made here in this pull-down menu will permanently change this photograph, this picture. Any adjustments done here will add a new layer. So let's see how that works. So image, adjustment, black and white. Now, of course, you're not really going to see much of a difference because it's already a black and white photo, but we hit OK, boom, black and white. No difference over here. Now, if we go to black and white here and add that adjustment, you'll see that it creates a layer above our layer where the black and white adjustment exists. And we can click on this and adjust this black and white area, and it's going to affect this photograph. Both of them will give you the same result. This one, however, if you delete it, your image won't be changed. This one permanently changes your image. So it's actually better to do it this way in your adjustment panels than it is to permanently change it. So first things first, add an adjustment, make it black and white. Next, we need to begin adjusting the brightness and darknesses of this object so that it works in what we're doing. Actually, I'm going to take this time to crop it out real quick. I think I did like how that circle looked with the house inside of that circle. So I'm going to grab that, go to select, inverse, delete it. Perfect. Okay, so when we burn with a laser cutter, not only are we changing the color, obviously the burn part is going to be darker, but we're actually removing material. As we burn the wood, it's going to get lower and lower, like this. The burn part is going to get burned in. The parts not burned are going to be left alone. Okay? So in this situation, anything white is going to appear closer to the viewer than anything that's burned. All right? Now, this is an easy thing to forget, but when you're actually making something, this makes a big difference because in this photograph, my lightest area is up here in the sky. Now, I don't actually want this sky closer to me physically when this etching actually burns than the house. So I want the house lighter than the background. So we've got to do a few things to adjust the way this works. And here's where the adjustments come in. And your selection tools. So if I want to affect only the house, I can select the house. So I'll use my quick selection tool, and I'm going to select this house. And of course, it's not a perfect, selection, but we'll go back and adjust it in a second. Okay. So let's remove some of this. Okay. You'll notice like after every click or so I'll stop. That way if things jump and go too crazy, I can undo that without undoing everything. Okay, and we'll get in here. Whoops, and we'll pull this back out. Okay, good. So now I've got, oops, let's get rid of this little chunk here and this little chunk here. So now I have a selection. You'll see it's actually that. Ooh. Let's grab that window while I'm at it too. Let's make my brush a little bigger so I pick up this stuff. Okay, and again, selection tools we went over previous. So now that I have this selected, if I adjust, and we're going to adjust a few things. So I'm going to start with brightness contrast, which is the first thing over here. If I start to adjust the brightness and contrast, it's not affecting the entire circle. It's only affecting the house, which is exactly what I want, because I want this house to be brighter than the background. Now, looking at this photo this way, it actually almost appears too light, which is kind of frustrating and annoying. But again, remember, this is the result we're going to end up with. So anything white is going to be closest to the surface and untouched. So that's what I want from the house. I want that thing to pop right out at you. Okay? So there's the contrast to the brightness contrast to that. Now I can add another adjustment to the background. So with our object is not selected anymore, but you'll see that we actually have this layer here is creating sort of a mask here. Actually, if I do panel options and I make this larger, you can see a little bit closer. This shape is the house shape. So if I actually click on this layer and I grab my magic wand tool and I use this layer to help me select the area. Whoops, I have all. No, it's not simple all layer. Let's hide this. If I thought it would allow me to grab that. Maybe not. I guess it's not allowing me to grab that. That's okay. If I grab my quick selection tool again, and this time we'll deselect this, we'll grab the outside. And we'll hold Alt Option to pull this into our selection. Any mistakes we can find, we can grab here. So right now, I've selected the outside part. Okay? So what we're actually going to do with this selection is create another adjustment, and we'll do brightness contrast again, and we'll darken maybe the background. We can add contrast if we want. We can darken the background to help this house stand out. Now, while we're at it, we can do a couple other things too. So that's adding adjustments. The only other adjustments you might mess around with in terms of getting the result that you want are potentially levels, and everything else you probably won't play around with. So I'll add a levels just to show you how that operates. So levels will allow you to take away the darkest darks, take away the lightest lights. You see it's even affecting my background color, which I don't want. And I can actually reposition where those midtones go. Okay, so I can play around with all that. I don't need this. I'm actually going to trash it and get rid of it, delete it. This house is pretty good where I have it now. It's kind of where I want it. But I think I want to darken the sky a little bit and lighten up the grass. So here's another way to do that. I'll select my layer with my house on it. Under here, you have a couple options. Here it is. Dodge tool and burn tool. Now both of these tools are taken from photography. The burn tool will make things darker, and the dodge tool will make things lighter. So actually you want to dodge. I'm going to change my brush. It's on a weird brush right now. We can pick this, that's fine. We can dodge our midtones, and so I can start to lighten up the foreground a little bit, just so that it looks closer to us, right? Maybe not as close as the house, but maybe pretty close. And we can burn, and again, I'll change my brush, it sets to something kind of weird. And we can burn the background, so that, again, it looks further away from us. And then you can choose what you decide to burn. Right now it's midtones, but if I go to highlights, it's going to affect that bright area a little bit more and not affect my midtones as much. So we can get a much even darker background and a nice bright white house that's going to stand out forward and a lighter area closest to us. So that pretty much goes over all the adjustments that we have in terms of black and white, levels, contrast, brightness, and using these sort of masks to mask things out and get exactly the result you want, so that when we etch this, again, these white areas are going to stay closer to the surface, the black areas are going to recede. So be careful with that. If you have a photograph where the main characters in the front of the photograph are a lot darker than the background, you might want to play with some adjusting so that your background is darker and gets burned back and pushed back further than your foreground subject matter, which should be lighter. Okay? Next, we'll go over exporting this and getting ready to put it into Illustrator.